Welcome. I want to explain the long-run average total cost. Run average total cost curve. And here, we're starting on our y-axis with the costs and our x with scale. And we see how costs decrease. These are called economies of scale. Stay the same, and then begin to increase as scale increases. First of all, notice here, this is a high upfront setup cost at 0. They're not producing anything. You need to set up your operation before you can produce anything. These are known as indivisible setup costs. As in, it's not divisible at this point. A simple way of explaining this would be to say, as scale increases, an indivisible setup cost becomes divisible, and as it's divided by an ever larger quantity, the per unit costs go down. Next, learning by doing. As you're making greater scale or making more of something, you're getting a lot of practice doing it. In that practice, you're hopefully becoming more efficient, and you're sharing those ideas with other employees about how to become more efficient. This is called benchmarking. So here you can see, as we increase scale, a good way of putting this would be as scale increases, people do a job enough so they figure out the most efficient way to do it. They share that across the company, and thus lower per unit costs. Lastly, labor specialization. What this means is as a company is growing, it's hiring more people. But if it's here with just a few employees, it likely doesn't have specialists in every area of their production. But as they grow, they hire more and more people, and hopefully those are specialists. A good way to describe this would be as scale increases, more employees are hired. Therefore, specialized labor is being hired, which increases efficiency and lowers per unit costs. Now a couple of complications here. Here we see an X in efficiency. This quantity here is their true cost that they could achieve, yet their costs are higher. So we have 3 examples for this. We have a smart company trying to figure out ways to keep their employees happy, healthy, motivated, efficient, and productive. Therefore, it's like Google having free meals and free daycare and free dry cleaning. It keeps their constituents or their workers happier, and thus it's going to help them over the long run. It also could be a stupid company that decides to buy a private jet, say a coffee shop with a private jet, certainly not an expense they need. It could also be related to a government contract or a regulated monopoly. Regulated monopolies and military contracts are often paid on a cost-plus basis, meaning if they said that this was their cost here, they would just get a percentage of this number as their profit. Yet if they decide that this is their cost, they inflate their costs, then the percentage of this higher number is going to be larger, therefore they're going to earn a higher profit. Then here and here, we have 2 different companies, A and B. Notice they still have economies of scale to exploit. If they produced greater quantity, they could lower their costs. So if these 2 companies merge together, they could move out here by combining their quantities together and thus produce more of their product at a much lower price. At a much lower cost, and thus they can sell it for a much lower price. So this whole area here with a downward slope is economies of scale. Once we get to the minimum quantity to reach the minimum costs, we hit minimum efficient scale. The minimum quantity to reach your lowest possible costs. But then notice here, this flat line here, constant returns to scale mean that your costs aren't increasing or decreasing across this scale. But then at some point your costs begin to increase because you're getting so large. One simple reason would be because you're large enough, you're demanding more and more of your own inputs, that their costs are increasing. We know as demand increases, price increases. Therefore, as demand for your own inputs increase, the costs of your inputs are increasing. Next, coordination failures. Your company is getting so large, it's hard to manage the organization. How do you communicate across an organization, across a country, or across the world when it used to be a company that was just in one building? You're going to have to spend more money on travel and communications to keep things coordinated and working smoothly. A good way to describe this would be as scale increases, a company has a harder time coordinating its activities. Therefore, its costs need to increase to keep better coordination of their operations. Lastly, team spirit. This one here, just you've gotten so large here, you no longer have a feeling that you know everybody. a feeling that you're part of a big team who works together in different buildings. And therefore you might become less motivated. And costs might begin to go up because your efficiency has dropped. This would be as scale increases. People no longer feel part of a family team at work, and therefore their efficiency goes down, increases costs. Now lastly, if there's a company here in this area of diseconomies of scale, you could say they should decrease production, but maybe they're getting a price way up here, so they're still earning a profit. They just want to earn more of a profit by bending this cost curve. And bending a cost curve here relates to these things here. Not over here, but here, because we're trying to bend this portion of the cost curve. So here you'd have to try to negotiate better prices for your inputs, find new inputs, find alternative inputs, find alternative suppliers. Here, with coordination failures, find more efficient ways to manage your far-flung operations by using technology or new methods. Team spirit. You might mitigate that loss by working on building teams within your far-flung operations, building in context,